Dude, you're doing everything wrong and you don't even know it. There are so many better ways to go about this. Because if you don't, you're gonna send all of this down the drain, and I don't want that for you. But that's what I'm here for. So let's go over the worst 5 mistakes that you could be doing as a freelancer and you may not even really know. So the last one I realized very recently, and you're gonna see why. But they're easy to fix for the most part, and the first one applies most to that. When I started working as a freelancer, I'd sometimes negotiate with a client and just try to figure out what they want. And then when I think that I figured out what they want, sometimes they wouldn't be on the same page, and that obviously created a lot of back and forth and confusion. So the first mistake that I realized I was doing, that I was not using invoices. So what's an invoice? An invoice is a little document that you send depending on the payment processor you're using, that basically itemizes what they're getting from you and for how much. Once they look through it and are fine with what's listed on it, they basically pay that invoice, and now you have a written agreement of what you got and what they paid for. And that tended to fix a lot of problems for me, as well as add quite a few benefits. It makes you look a lot more professional, they respect you more, it makes you look more official as a business, and unless you're living in Dubai, you're gonna need it for tax reasons. And lastly, but definitely not least, there will come a time, I guarantee you, that you're gonna have a problem with the client. Maybe you wrote down something wrong, or maybe they're trying to be unsavory, so to speak, to you, and they're gonna complain to the payment processor. So in my case, that's PayPal. And when you have that invoice showing them what they paid for, the fact that they looked over it and agreed for it, and then they paid for it voluntarily, it puts a lot more chips to your side and makes your case look a lot stronger, just in case they did try to do something. See, I told you they were easy and simple, just like the next one we're gonna talk about. So around the same time frame, also when I was just starting out and trying to make sense of this whole thing, and I'd send my offer to literally every living being that existed, whether it ran, crawled, or freaking leaped, just so long as they seemed to have the slightest interest in getting work done for them, be it edited, thumbnails, whatever. But at that time, I barely get anyone to answer me, which, as you can imagine, was extremely confusing and frustrating beyond all measure, because from what I was seeing, I had a decent portfolio, my drive was categorized by niche, I had a decent opening message, it just didn't make sense. I was clearly established, so what was wrong? As I was racking my mind about it and thinking it over and over and over, I realized something. The sooner I was sending my message to the time that they posted the request, the more likely I was to get a response. Keep in mind, I didn't say an offer, but just a response. As I had more and more experiences with it, I made the observation that the closer you send your offer to the time that they made the post, the more likely they were to engage back with you. And even if they just said, no, I already found someone, or just any kind of response was better than nothing, it still gives you feedback. And the best time tends to be usually at about under an hour. Because if you go past that, then they usually will have found someone by then and they just don't need you anymore, so they just don't bother replying, or they never look back at the messages in the first place. Just moving on and never looking back. Like how you won't after seeing the next mistake. Corny? Yeah, that was corny, I'm not gonna lie. So when you're sending out offers Spitfire to a bunch of people, you'll find people that won't be able to pay you very much, and that's completely natural, but when that happens, maybe you shouldn't just dump it and move on. Why? Well, because I want you to reconsider and look at the work itself and judge it by this criteria. How much am I gonna learn from this? I mean, like, look, if it's work that you've already done 100 times and you're already very acquainted with it and you won't learn much from it and you're already good at it, then yeah, of course, don't do it for free. But if it's something completely new or something that you're really bad at and you want it to be improving in it, and you just happen to have that opportunity just fall right onto your lap, then maybe consider doing it for free. And hey, at the end of the day, money is not the only compensation. Maybe they have a huge social group of creators, video editors, and producers and people of the like that you can connect to and find work through there. Maybe some big shot YouTuber, or just some other of the million possible things. The short and skinny of it is, if you think it's worth it, then go ahead and do it, even if it would be for free. And although while money isn't everything, it is certainly not nothing. You run into many clients where that could be a friction point, and a very heavy one at that. Especially when you're starting out. That tended to be the hardest part for me starting out because I just didn't know how to price stuff. But ironically enough, that's the most important part that you need to get down. Making sure that you're not charging too low. Why? For a whole host of reasons. If you feel like you're not being paid what that work is worth, you're not gonna put your heart into it. You won't make the best possible work. You won't like the client and you won't value them as much because they didn't value your time as much. And you'll hate every moment that you spend working on it because you feel like you're wasting your time on a losing deal. It's just a losing bet for everybody. So what's the solution? Well, there's a pretty nifty system for it. I want you to think in your mind, how long do you think it would take? Then take that estimate and add 50% on it, which is something I read in the book Essentialism. We tend to have a psychological bias where we heavily underestimate how long something is gonna take, and adding that 50% margin, so to speak, onto it tends to balance stuff out. Now that you have that modified number, you're gonna assign an hourly rate that you think is suitable for that particular gig, depending on who the client is, how much money do you think it's gonna make them, how difficult it is, how time intensive it is, and multiplied by that number, which is pretty abstract. So let's take a quick example. Say I'm editing a video that I know will take me about 2 hours roughly. Take the 50% of that, which is 1 hour, and add it onto it. So now you have 3 hours. Let's say it's a fairly medium difficulty video. It's not too easy, it's not too hard. So we assign it to $20 an hour. So 20 multiplied by 3, you get 60. And that is the code that you should then give to the client. Now, how flexible you want to be with that number, now that's completely up to you. Personally, I wouldn't recommend it. It just creates an unhealthy expectation, and if they're trying to haggle the price, it's usually not a good sign, because it tends to create problems that we mentioned right above. So yeah. And last but definitely not least is what you're seeing right in front of you right now. You're looking at a video of me feeling drawn by my innate, imitable charisma, just oozing out of me, glowing, shining. And as you watch more and more of me, I become a familiar existence to you. Now let's say you're a creator as well. You have a channel where you put out content, maybe a short form video account on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. Who knows? And you need an editor. Who will be the first person that comes to your mind? Myself. So you can get all the fancy groovy stuff that I do added to your own work. Now take that example and multiply it by 10, 100, 1,000. Depending on how many views you get, and you have what is called an inbound lead freaking machine. Allows me to make incredible work for both parties. So the last thing I can say to you is make content, put yourself out there. The more of you that exists, the more of you that can be seen, and the more of you that can be reached out. And if you need an editor for this or for something else, well, let's talk. I hope you liked the video. As you see, I'm trying to be a lot more regular with it, which is awesome because now I've been almost a month through uploading each week right on time, which is freaking great. So if you're enjoying the effort, let's get a subscribe. I got a different camera now, so it's a lot wider and I can finally move my hands around, which is freaking awesome. So you can boost my sometimes very dwindling motivation, of course, and hopefully see many more of this in the future. And if you need an editor or a LUT pack, then you can find the links for both of those in my description. And with that, don't forget to smile. It'll make you feel a lot better. Bye.